Hey everyone, and welcome back again to my YouTube channel. This is Style Chica, and in today's video, I'm going to show you guys how I went about the making of this beautiful goddess dress. This dress has been requested by some of you on my Instagram, and I'm so excited to have made this dress because the outcome is so beautiful. If this is something you're interested in learning, keep on watching. And if you're yet to subscribe to the channel, do also hit on that subscribe button. Don't forget to turn on your post notification so you can be one of the first to get notified whenever I upload a new video. Leave a like if you find this tutorial very helpful. Tell me what you think about this dress in the comment section and let's get started. The materials I'll be using to make this dress would be this hard net. This hard net is just going to help me give the gathers a little bit of a fuller and puffy look. I have my matching thread. I also have my lining. For my lining I got about 1.5 yard, and this lining is by length 60. Then I have my fabric here. I don't know what exactly this fabric is called, but it's just a regular pattern fabric. And I have about 4 yards here, but I'm sure that you just bring in about 3 to 3.5 yards for this style. I'm going to start with drafting the pattern. I'll be using the patterns to cut out on our main fabric. So first, at this point, I'm just going to draw a straight line, and this line is going to be my shoulder line. It's also my starting line. On this line, I'm going to divide my shoulder measurement by 2. My shoulder measurement is 16. 16 by 2 is 8 inches. I'll leave a mark at that point. So I'm going to mark out a neckline, and this neckline is just going to be for a guide. So I'm going to take the neck width as 3 inches, and I'll take the neck depth also as 3 inches. So I'll go ahead and connect to form a round neckline. If you're on the bigger side, your neck depth and your neck width should be about 3.5 inches. So from this shoulder point, I'm going to come down by 1 inch, and then I'm just going to connect to meet my neck right here. I'm going to take my armhole measurement. For my armhole measurement, it is my bust measurement divided by 6 plus 1.5 inches. So when I did that, I had about 7.6, which is somewhere around here. Just meant I had to leave a mark there. From this point now, I'm just going to draw a straight line upward like this, and I'll draw another line outward like this. So from this point now, I'm just going to mark out my bust line, which is my shoulder to my bust measurement, my shoulder to where I have my nipple, and then I'm going to mark out my under bust line, my shoulder to my under bust. I'll mark out my waistline, and then I'll go ahead and mark out my hip line at 24 inches, and then you can go ahead and mark out your full length. For my full length of this gown, it's about 40 inches, but this pattern paper here ends at 39.5, so I'll just add the remaining allowance to my material when I'm cutting out. So I'll just go ahead and extend these lines like this. So guys, as you can see, I've gone ahead to label these lines so it doesn't get anybody confused. This is my armhole, my bust line, my under bust line, my waistline, and then my hip line. So now I'm just going to come to my armhole line, and I'll take my round bust measurement. I'll divide my round bust measurement by 4, and I'll mark that out on this armhole line. So then I'll come to this point and I'll measure what I have between my shoulder to my armhole by 2. You can simply do that by folding your tape in 2 and then leave a mark at that point. So from this point, you're going to come in by about 1/2 inch. Then you're going to connect these 3 points together to get an armhole curve just like this. So guys, I'm going to come to my bust line, and then I'll take my nipple to nipple measurement and I'll divide it by 2. My nipple to nipple measurement is 8. 8 divided by 2 gives me 4. I'm going to mark out 4 inches on my bust line right here. I'll mark out 4 inches on my under bust line, and I'll mark out 4 inches on my waistline. I'll also mark out this 4 inches though on my armhole line, and I'll just connect a straight point like this. So I'll come to my under bust line, and on both sides of my under bust line, I'm going to go out by about 0.75. If you're on the big side, you can just do a full 1 inch, and if you're on the smaller side, you can just consider going out by 1/2 inch. So I'm going to mark out the same measurement on my waistline also, just like this. And then I'm just going to connect with a straight point to meet it. So guys, from this point now, I'm just going to connect to meet my bust point. I'll connect with a curve so that I can have a cup shape just like this. Alright, so once I have this now, I'm just going to place my tape on my shoulder now, and I'm going to take my neck depth. So for my neck depth, I want to use 7 inches so that I can cover up cleavage. So you just pick your neck depth dependent on how you want yours to look like. So at this point now, I'm just going to draw a straight line, and this is going to be my neck depth. Alright, so this is my neck depth line, and then I'm just going to connect this straight point here to meet my neck depth line right here. So on both sides of my neck depth line, I'm just going to go out by about 0.75 inches again. So whatever you take down here, you can go ahead and take it up here too. Okay, then I'm just going to use my curved ruler again, and I'm going to connect from my bust points to meet my neck depth. So the essence of this is to make sure that your neck does not slack. If you don't do this, at the end of the day, your neck may be slacking, and I don't think it will look very nice. Alright, so now I'm just going to come to my bust points here, my bust line, and then I'm going to take my bust measurement divided by 4. I'll go ahead and mark that out, and then I'll add an extra 1.5 inches of sewing allowance. Because it's the same measurement I marked on my armhole line, I'll go ahead and add about the same measurements for my allowance, which is 1.5 inches. I'll connect upwards to meet like this, and then I'll just complete my armhole into it. So guys, my under bust line here, I'm going to take my round under bust measurements divided by 4, and then I'll mark that out. I'll take the allowance that I have for that here, and then I'll replace it so I don't have a shortage, and then I'm going to add an extra 1.5 inches for allowance. I'll mark out my waistline measurements, which is my round waist measurement divided by 4, and then I'll mark out the allowance that I have in between this point so this doesn't run short, and then I'll still add the same 1.5 inches of extra allowance, and I'll just connect upwards to meet this point. Okay guys, so my hip line here, I'm going to take my round hip measurement divided by 4, and then I'll mark that out here. But then before I add my allowance here, at this point here, I'm going to connect this line all the way downward. Okay, so at my waistline here, I'm going to measure what I have between this space from here to here. So between this space here, I have about 3 inches. So I'm just going to mark that same 3 inches on my hip line, and I'll mark it all the way to the full length of this dress. I'll go ahead and connect upward like this. So I will measure out the dot which I have here as 2 inches, and then I'll mark it out on my hip line. I will also mark it out on my full length line, and I'll connect all the way down. Alright guys, so now I'm just going to adjust this back in place like this. And so on my hip line now, I've already marked out my hip measurement divided by 4. So I'll take this allowance now that I have here, which is for my darts. I'll replace it on my hip line here, and I'll still add the same 1.5 inches extra allowance that I was adding to the rest of this bodice piece. So I'll go ahead now and connect from my hip line to meet my waistline just like this. And from my hip line here, I'll just connect just like a flare. I'll connect outward like this with my ruler. So I'll come to this point, and then I'll shade it because this point I'm going to be cutting it off. So guys, on a piece of paper, I want you to measure your body. So what you're going to measure is your shoulder to your waist measurement. But this shoulder to your waist measurement now, you're measuring it at the front part of your body. Okay, so my shoulder to my waist measurement at the front part of my body is 16.5 inches, which is 16.5. So now if you take this same measurement from the back side of your body, that's your shoulder to your waist, you're going to have a different measurement. And for me, I had 15 inches. Okay, that is to say that your shoulder to your waist measurement at your front is different from your shoulder to your waist measurement at your back. Your front will usually be bigger than your back because of your bust. Okay, so now whatever measurement you have, you are going to subtract it from each other. When I subtract 15 from 16.5, I have about 1.5 inches. Okay, so now I'm going to take this 1.5 inches, and from my bust line here, I'm going to come down by 1.5 inch. So from this 1.5 inch point here, I will just connect it into my bust line like this. I hope you understand. So I'm going to shade this part because I'm going to cut it off. So this helps to tighten the bust and give our bust more space. It also helps the back and the front to align without any material at the side gathering on our body. So to just give you a perfect fit. So this is a side dart. This is called a side dart. Okay, so from my neck depth here, we have a little bit of a V design at this point if you look at the dress. So from my neck depth here, I'm just going to come down by about 2 to 2.5 inches. Okay, I don't want this to be very open, so I'll just do about 2 to 2.5 inches. And then on the neck depth line itself, I'll come up by about 0.75 or half of an inch. You don't want this to get too wide once you sew it open. So I'm just going to connect like this to give a little bit of a V shape. Alright, now this is what I have for this part. So to get our gathers that we have on this part of the dress, I just want to Take the measurement that you have in between this space, which is your waistline now, to your hip line. For my waistline to my hip line, I have about 8 inches. So I'm going to take the midpoint of 8 inches, which is 4 inches. I'll go ahead and leave a mark here. Alright. So from this point now, I want to blend this into this point here. But then instead of actually using this 4 inches here, I want this gather to start a little bit higher. So I'll just come up by about half inches from that point. Alright. So I'm just going to be using dotted lines. I'll be using dotted lines to connect. You can do this with a pencil first, and then if you like your results, you can then thicken it out with your marker. So I'm using dotted lines to connect into this point because this is how I want it to be like. So once I look at it and it looks like something that I like, I'll then use my ruler to bring out the lines. Right? Now this is what it looks like. It just goes all the way down like this. But now for my actual gathers, at this point here, I'm just going to be doing a splash and spread method. So now from this point here, I'm just going to divide it by 1 inch. So I've marked out my first 1 inch. I'll mark out 1 inch again. I'll mark out 1 inch. I'll keep marking out 1 inch because this is a splash and spread method. I'll mark out 1 inch all the way to this point here. So now from here, I'm just going to be connecting the way downward like this. Alright guys, so this part now is going to be our gathers. Okay, so to start with, at this point here, I'm just going to cut this like this. So just be careful not to cut it into this point. And then now I'm just going to cut open my dart at this point here also. So now at this point, I'll then be able to tilt this one like this. So I'm going to be using paints to hold this down. You can actually use a sellotape so that it's easier for you. But for me, my sellotape is colored, so I don't want to cover any of the details so you guys can see properly. Alright guys, so now that I've gone ahead to pin this down, I'll just continue cutting like this. So at this point now, you can see that one part is looking shorter than the other. To do that, you just have to easily blend it out just like this. Blend it out into your armhole line. So for my back, for my zipper allowance, I'm going to be using 1.5 inches. I'll mark that out at the side of this pattern all the way to the base, and then I will connect. I'll take my front piece. I forgot to cut out the V-neck, so I'm going to cut it out now. And then I'll just place it directly on the zipper allowance line. I'll be taking all my measurements from here, and then I'll take the other side piece. Make sure to place it correctly, not slanted but straight, making sure that you have the same 2 inches that allowance space just as it was placed in the front in between. Then I'm going to take my gathers piece and then I'll also attach it here. I made use of a solo tape to hold this down in place just like this, and then I am tracing out the pattern that I have for my front to my back. Now that I have this, I'm going to take it off and then I'm going to transfer my gathers lines to this also. So I'm just going to take off the rest of the patterns now right after I have done this. So now I'm going to take my dart. For my dart, my nipple to nipple measurement divided by 2, which is 4 inches, and then I mark the straight line after taking that measurement. From this point, I'll draw a straight line across. Just take this point as your waistline, okay? That's where you're going to be taking your dart from. On both sides of this line now, I'm going to come out by half of an inch, and then I will connect upward just like you can see me doing. So now I'm going to take the measurement I have from this side of the dart towards the zipper allowance, which is 3 inches. I'll mark out 3 inches and the rest of this pattern. Just like I did to the front, I will connect down to complete my dart. For the other side of the dart, I'll connect it into my gathers line, just like you can see me doing. And then I will go ahead and cut this out. So next, to prevent zipper bulge, on this line, I'm going to come up by 1 inch and I'll go down by 1 inch also. I'll connect to form a triangle-like shape, and then I'll just cut this open and fold it this way. This is going to help prevent zipper bulge, alright? And this is all my pieces now For my gathers, I'm going to be using this other piece here that I have already drawn lines on. It's going to be a splash and spread method. To do that, I'm just numbering this from 1 to 9. Okay, so after that, I'm just cutting this open like you can see me doing. Because it's splash and spread method, we spread this out and then we'll cut it, which I'll be showing you guys just how to. So I'm going to start sewing by joining my back pieces. I've used my pattern to cut out my material. I added half inch of allowance all around, aside from the side for this piece. And then for this other piece here, I added 1 inch of allowance to the down, and then on the side I added half inch of allowance, but I did not add to the zipper side. So to start sewing, I'm going to be joining my material pieces separately and my lining pieces separately because I want to do a very neat inner sewing. So this is my center back. I'm opening this up, and then I'm going to take my side back, and then I'll be placing them just at the right sides, and then I'm going to be joining on these pieces by half of an inch, which is the allowance that I added. After I was done, this is what I had. I went on to press the seams, and then I also did the same thing for my lining. I joined on it and I pressed the seams. Okay, so for my front pieces, I added half inch of allowance to the side, just like you can see, and at the length of this center front, I added 1 inch of allowance. To the side front, I added half inch of allowance all around, apart from the side because I already added allowance to the pattern for that. So now I'm going to start joining. I'll be joining the material and the lining pieces separately also. For the center piece, I'm just going to be aligning them right sides as they're meant to be, and then I'm going to join on it by half of an inch. After I was done, this is what it looked like. I can already see my cup forming. Alright, so for my lining piece, I'm going to be padding this piece because it's an off shoulder and I do not want to wear a bra. So to pad this piece now, I've cut out my pads already. So this is the measurement. I came down by 2 inches, and that's where the pad started from. And the pad stopped at my under bust line. Okay, so I just curved it out to the shape of the lining. It's as simple as that. For the sides, I did the same thing, but then I rounded the sides a bit because I didn't want the side to be too packed up, so my bust does not look too big and too padded. So now I've just gone ahead to sew on the sides, and then I've also joined these pieces together, and that's how easy it was to pad this side. So I'm notching the under bust point here so that I could have a better curve, and I'm doing that to both sides. So I did mention doing it to my lining, sorry, to my main material piece. So now I'm just going ahead to notch this main material piece at the under bust so this sits properly. All right. So now after you've done that, just make sure that you iron this seam open, and I used my overball to do this. Okay, I used my tailor's ham. I'm not sure what it's called, but I used that to iron this seam open very well. This is very important. Please do not skip this step. If you want, you can also top stitch on that part after you're done. So at this side you can see that my breast pad is sticking out. Okay, so to treat that, I'm just going to use my scissors again, and I'll just form a V shape around there. So this breast pad goes in a bit, and this is what I have this looking like. So now I've gone ahead to press on the seams, and it's looking flatter. So now I'm going to join my lining pieces together at the side. I'll take my back lining pieces now, and then I'm going to sew on the side. I added 1.5 inches allowance when I was cutting out the pattern. So on the sides, after holding them together in place, I'll use my pins, hold it down, make sure you use your pins so it doesn't move around and disturb you while sewing. And then I'm going to close up the sides by 1.5 inches. This was what I had after I did that, and then I repeated the same thing on my material piece. For the top part of this dress, it's going to be something like a cape. So then I'm going to measure what I have in this space. What I got was 6 inches. So for that, I'm going to take a piece of material. I'm going to cut out the length of this as 6 inches and the width of this as 6 inches, just like you've seen me measure. So this is in two for both sides. I just folded this in two, and then I'm going to sew down on the edge by half of an inch. After sewing down on half of an inch, let's go ahead and flip it over to the right side and make sure to give it a good press. Thereafter, you're going to take your gown piece again, and at this top part now, because you sewed on half of an inch on both sides, when you place it on this part, you're going to have half of an inch open on both sides. I do hope you understand. So this half of an inch is what you'll be using to turn it in with your lining. After I was done attaching it, this is what I had this looking like. For my gathers, I've gone ahead to spread out these pieces that I splashed open, and I spread it out by 2 inches of allowance. Okay, you can spread it out by as much as allowance as you want, depending on how full you want your gathers to be. Just go ahead and cut it out and follow the shape when you place it. Alright. So now I've gone ahead to take off the pieces. This is what it looks like. Okay. So at this top part here at the edge, I went ahead to leave a notch. This notch is an indication of where I'll be joining this piece to. So for the length of this, I added 1 inch to the length when I was cutting out, and then I folded the edge by the same 1 inch to give us a neat finishing. I also cut out my lining in the same piece. I know I said 1.5 yard of lining would be enough at the initial part of this video, but then just go ahead to get 2 yards of lining because as you can see, I ended up joining my lining. I cut out my lining as 3 inches less than the length of the material piece. Then I also have my hard net, which I also went ahead to cut out in the same shape as my material. But for my hard net, I cut it out as 5 inches less than the material length. I'm doing it this way so that each piece is shorter than the other and it can hide inside without showing. Okay, you can see that this shape follows the shape of the material, so just make sure you're doing yours like this and cut out 2 pieces of each of this, one for each side of the dress. So at this middle part here, remember I said I left a notch, and this is where I'm going to be joining to the dress. So you're going to take your side, at the side where you joined your front and your back together. I do hope you understand. Take your seam now. Sorry, take this part that you notched, and then you're going to pin down to the side seam, okay, the side joining. So along this part here, you're going to come up by 1 inch. That is where you're going to be joining this piece from. So along the straight part, just make sure you follow what I'm doing. Along the straight part, you are going to pin it down. So when you sew down straight, from the part now that is curving, okay, that's the part you're going to be gathering. So all this part here, we gather to this part here. So you sew straight and then you gather. You're going to do the same thing to this side. Place it 1 inch above this point because I'm going to have to turn it in. And then this other part is going to be gathered. After I was done, this is what it looked like. So now I do hope you understand. This is what it looked like from the back. So I gathered all around this side and along the other side I sewed straight. So now this is what I did for both sides. Just go ahead and do those. So for my lining piece, I'm just going to repeat the same process. For my lining now, I have both my net and my material here. So I'm going to be gathering my lining first. And after gathering my lining, just the same way I did to my material piece, then I will then gather my net on top of it. After I was done, this is what it was looking like. You see, I did one before the other, just the same way I did my material piece. And I did this on both sides. This is what it looks like from the front. This net is going to help to boost the gathers and make it look fuller. So it also hides inside, okay? So to cut out my sleeve, I'm drawing a straight line as my starting line. From this point, I'm coming down by my sleeve length plus allowance. And then I'm going to draw a straight line across this point also. On this line, I'm going to take my round sleeve measurement and I'll divide it by 2. I'll add an extra inch for sewing allowance. So I'm just going to make use of my ruler and then I'll be connecting from this top part with a slope just to meet this point just like I can see. Go ahead and cut that out. So to cut out your sleeve pattern, you're going to fold your fabric in two. Take this middle part of your sleeve and then you're going to splash it open just like you can see me doing, okay? So just try not to splash it too much, but splash it enough so you can spread it out. Then I'm going to make use of my marker to complete along the lines. These lines I'm marking out is along the point we are going to be cutting on. Alright, so now I've gone ahead to cut out lining pieces for this also. I'll be using this lining piece to turn this inside out. So I'll sew at the top part, I'll sew at the base, I'll just leave the sides open to flip it to the right side. After I was done, this is what it looked like. I also gave this a good press. So at the top part here, just along the lines that you can see me marking, I'll go ahead and sew down on it. Okay? So I'll sew down on it. After I was done, this is what I had this looking like. So now I'm going to pass my elastic through this hole which I've just created after sewing on it. And my elastic is just half of an inch. Just make sure that the elastic is long enough and tight enough to go over your shoulders to your back so you have a nice grip. Okay? This is what I had after I was done passing mine through it. And I cut out and did 2 pieces of this. Okay? So I'm going to be attaching this to my dress. at the top parts here. That same half inch of allowance that I was keeping at the side to turn it over with my lining, I'll still make sure that I have that same allowance at the side. Okay, so just along the area I'm pinning down, I'll go ahead and sew on it. After I was done, this is what I had. Now I'm just going to be attaching this to my back also. You can see what it looks like at the front. I'll be attaching this to my back. So for my back, I'm just going to take the sleeve and then I'll place it half inch away from the edge. I'll pin down on it and sew. After I was done, this is what this looked like, okay? So just go ahead and repeat the same process to yours. Now I'm going to work on my zipper for my back. For my zipper, I'm going to be making use of an invisible zipper. Just going to bring the pieces together like this. So from the top part, I'm going to pick a point where I want my zipper to stop. Wherever your zipper should stop should be enough for this gown to pass through your hips up to your body. I do hope you understand. So I'm picking a point around here. So from this point, I'll sew down and then at the upper part, I'll place my zipper just like we usually do it. After I was done, this is what I had this looking like. Alright, so now I'm just going to add my lining piece to this. I'm using my lining piece to turn all of this over. You start by opening up your zipper and then along this top part of the gown, all right, you want to also bring your lining piece and then you're going to be pinning it all around. You're going to pin across from the V neckline into your armhole to your back. Just go ahead and pin down on this, just like you can see me doing. Without pinning down on this, along the areas I'm pointing out, you're going to sew on half of an inch, okay? Now, after I was done sewing on half of an inch, this is what it looked like. So next, you're going to pick one side of your back of your zipper, and then you're going to place your lining piece over it just like this. Okay, so now you're going to sew, and then you're going to stop at where you have your zipper head at your back. Can you see? So you're going to sew along this part, and you're going to stop at where you have your zipper head. I did the same thing for both sides, after which I had this looking like this. Okay, it may look a bit complicated, but when you start sewing, you totally understand this. Okay, so this is what I had. With this now, I'm going to take these two parts, alright, these two parts of the back. You'd understand when you're sewing, take your two parts of your back. So from your zipper head there, you're now going to join the lining pieces together. And this is how you close up your back. You sew on 1.5 inches down, which is the same allowance that we added. And this is what this looks like. So after you're done now, once you start flipping it over, you will see that your lining and your material piece are now joined together. Your zipper is hidden inside. You can see how neat it looks at the back. Trust me, if you use this method to sew for yourself or for your client, you can definitely be called a professional because your seams should be hidden inside, just like you can see. Can you see how neat this looks? Okay. Go ahead and also give this a good press. It will help for the zipper bulge also. Alright, so this is what it looks like all around. I'm just giving you a good view. So now I've turned it over to the right and you can see what this looks like all around. Make sure you're giving this a good press. Pro tip, when you're pressing, do not press on your net so that it doesn't go flat. So at this part here, I'm going to complete it by hemming it inside just like this. Okay, so you're going to do the same thing to the back and you're going to do the same thing to the lining part. Alright, this is what it looks like all around. So if you want ropes for your gown, you can go ahead and add ropes to your gown. I added ropes to my gown after I was done making this video. I felt like I needed ropes since I had enough material. In total, I think I used about 2.5 to 3 yards of material. I did not use completely 3 yards of material. Okay, so if you use this pattern of sewing, you'll save material and then you get your inner seams looking very neat. So tell me what you think about this in the comment section. Like this video if you found it very helpful. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and I'll be seeing you in my next one.